So here's a chelicera, or a chelicerate, that you're much more familiar with, the arachnids. The arachnids are a group that include things that typically have 8 legs. They include spiders, mites, ticks, and scorpions. The big appendages are all here on the prosoma. The first pair of appendages, don't look for antennae, it's a chelicerate. The first pair of appendages are hard to see here. They're fang-like chelicera. Then you've got these 4 walking legs, all of which are attached to the prosoma. And here's the ophistosoma. There's a really narrow connection, which we call a pedicel. And so in the arachnids, you'll either have, depending on whether they live in water or land, book lungs or book gills typically, back in this part of the body, back in the ophistosoma. But you might also have tubes which lead into the body. And these blind tubes allow gas exchange, and we call those trachea, which isn't surprising since we call the human air passageways trachea. So I'm going to go over these groups in turn, so don't get too hung up on it. But the class Arachnida has a bunch of different groups. And so let's start with the scorpions, the order Scorpioniones. Not the clearest image, but this is a Florida bark scorpion. It's in the genus Centauroides. In Arizona, there are Centauroides which can kill you. The Florida bark scorpion, fortunately, is not a very venomous species. It hurts like a wasp sting, but people don't die from it, perhaps unless they're allergic. But it's not a very dangerous bite. It doesn't lead to nasty wounds or infection. It just hurts a lot when it happens. And these are really common, living under bark on dead trees and logs in many cases. If you look at the tip of the tail, I'll show you a diagram of this. This guy's got his tail extended out. When they're hiding under bark, it's often extended out. When they're out moving around, they'll arch it up over their back. And the stinger is at the very tip. It's the telson, the last body segment. So when I say not deadly, I'm talking about our Florida species, and that's also true, for example, of Australian species are not deadly. But there are dangerous scorpions in Central America, in parts of Asia, in Arizona, and so on. These guys are almost all highly reclusive. They tend not to come out in the daytime. They're primarily nocturnal, and they wander around, track things down, and grab them, particularly small insects. So here's another order, the Uropygi. And these are called whip scorpions because if you look at their last body segment, it's hard to see right here, but there's a long whip-like structure that sticks out of the back. And it also has, it looks like antenna when you look at the front. But if you look at these antennae, they're actually walking legs. Their first pair of walking legs have evolved to be really long and skinny and to face forward. They're not strong enough to grab anything. They use them like antennae, and then they use these big pincher-like chelicera to grab things like crickets and rip them apart. One of the cool things about these guys, we have them in Florida. You tend not to see them much. Sometimes if you're like moving wood and you get down to the bottom of a wood pile where there's damp ground, you'll find one. They're pretty secretive. They often burrow. But if you molest one, it'll shoot acetic acid out its back end. And they're pretty good at directing it. Acetic acid is basically vinegar, and so if it gets in your eyes, it really hurts. They also smell just like vinegar. And so these are another group of carnivorous chelicerates. A lot of chelicerates are carnivorous. Here's a more familiar group, the spiders. So we've got 36,000 species worldwide. Spiders are primarily terrestrial. Some live on the surface of bodies of water, like some of the fishing spiders. But the vast, and some of them live down, can spend short times underwater. But these things are basically terrestrial animals. They're venomous, and their chelicera are short, or in some cases long, fangs on the front end of the body. They inject venom and digestive juices into their prey. those juices then digest the prey in its own exoskeleton. They're typically eating arthropods, and so basically their prey is in a nice container. You inject these digestive juices. After a while, the prey liquefies, and then they suck them up. Spiders never eat solid food. They always just suck up their food. These guys have an interesting way of reproducing where they produce sperm and they put it into packages, and they don't copulate, but the spider, a male spider, has big pedipalps. So he's got his chelicera, and then sometimes you'll see when it looks like he's got two short legs in front of the 4 pairs of legs back here. This is a female, so you can't see her pedipalps. But a male would have pedipalps hanging out here, and what he does is he grabs this package of sperm with his pedipalps, and then he courts with a female, hopefully gets her receptive, so she doesn't eat him, and then it will typically take this pouch filled with sperm and use its pedipalp to insert it into the female. On the rear end of the spider, there are short appendages called spinnerets that produce silk. Silk is protein, and it's a really interesting protein in that it's secreted by the spinneret as a liquid. But as it's drawn out, the legs will draw it out, it solidifies. And these guys don't just make silk, they make lots of different kinds of silk. So a spider web is a classic example of spider silk. It's used for prey capture. Other spiders don't use it for prey capture. They just may hide in a burrow on the ground and have thin lines that radiate out from the burrow. The trapdoor spiders do this. And in that case, they use it for prey sensing. When insects and things bump into those little strands laying across the ground, the spider who's got its feet on those strands detects it and runs out and grabs the prey. They'll also use it for prey immobilization. Some of these big orb-weaving spiders are smart enough to know that if they've got a wasp, they have to subdue it because it's a nasty stinger. And so they'll wrap it up in prey. Sometimes they'll take something like moths, which aren't dangerous, and wrap them up simply so they can store them and eat them later. And so basically they use it for prey immobilization, so they can safely handle them or store them. They use it for aerial dispersal. And so spiders will go up on a branch when they're tiny, release silk, and they actually do it in situations where the branch they're on has a different electrical charge than the atmosphere. And they basically send this out, and this is caught by the wind, and with its electrical charge, it gets sucked up into the atmosphere, and they float off, and they can actually move hundreds and even thousands of miles using aerial dispersal as little spiderlings. They use it as a safety climb, or basically a safety rope. If you look at a jumping spider moving through the environment, it'll keep laying down a little silk line, so if it falls off its branch, it can climb back up on its safety line. If you're a spider that lives underwater, they'll make a little web underwater and then fill it with air bubbles and basically have this little underwater dome filled with air. They, of course, use it for webs. They do a variety of things. They use it in burrowing to keep their burrows from collapsing. Almost all spiders make silken egg cases to keep their eggs in. Here's some familiar spiders, hopefully. These big guys are sometimes called banana spiders. More properly, perhaps we should call them the golden silk spider. Here's the spiny orb weaver, a more colorful species. These spines aren't poisonous, and the spider's not poisonous, but they probably deter bird predation because it wouldn't feel really good to eat something this spiny. But these are both common species in Florida that build webs that if you walk through the woods, you're likely to walk into at some point. Here's some other ones. You probably know wolf spiders. There's a variety of different species of wolf spiders in the genus Lycosa and Hogna. Really diverse group. But they don't build webs. They run around and get trap prey. And if you took Biology 3, you remember working with them. Here's one of the orb weavers. There's several different beautiful black and yellow species. They throw these interesting zigzaggy lines in their webs. They're called stabilimentia, but probably what they really do is not stabilize the web. What they really do is warn birds not to go flying through it. And they also seem to attract some insects. So insects see these reflective zigzaggy things and fly right into the web and get caught. Okay, so I've covered spiders incredibly quickly. Just to go back, go out on some dewy morning and look around when the spider webs have dewdrops on them, and you're going to realize how many spiders there are in this world. It's stunning how many spiders live in 1 acre of grassland or forest. They are hugely abundant and really important members of the food chain. And so here's a group hopefully you've seen. This is called the order Opilones, but people have lots of different names for them. Some people call them daddy long legs. Some people say, oh, we should call them harvestmen. I don't care what you call them, they're Opilones. There's 7,000 species worldwide, so they're really quite diverse. And what sets them off is the fact they've got this tiny body. They have a fusion of the front part of the body and the back part of the body, so it looks just like this little ball up on 8 spindly legs. So some people will tell you these things have incredibly nasty venom, but fortunately they don't have the fangs to deliver it well. That's not true. They have no fangs, no poison, no silk glands. In some ways they're like spiders, but they've got a lot less going on. They do some things spiders can't do. One of the things, I didn't talk about spiders, but spiders can have no eyes, they can have 8 eyes. Spiders have lots of different numbers of eyes. These guys always have 2 eyes right on top of the body. They copulate, so they actually transfer the sperm through copulation, not using pedipalps like a spider would. Another difference is these guys chew up food. And they also do things like eat plants. All of the spiders are carnivorous. They're eating other animals. These guys often eat plant material, dead organic material, like a fallen fruit or something, half-rotting fruit. And so they eat a lot of material and they chew it up and swallow it. They use their chelicera in that way.